My family gave me poisoned whiskey as a gift. I kept the bottle and stuck it in. I didn't finish that sentence out loud. I let it hang between my teeth like a nail I hadn't decided to hammer yet. I set the bottle down on the counter, turned it until the gold label caught the kitchen light just right, and listened to the house breathe around me. Old maple floors, radiator hiss, the quiet that arrives after you bury a wife, and the phone stops ringing because people decide grief has an expiration date. The bottle was expensive. 12-year single malt. The sort of thing my son-in-law, Blake, liked to brag about when he was trying to impress people with money he didn't have. There was a handwritten tag tied to the neck with twine, to the patriarch. To many more years, my daughter Laura's looping script. I unscrewed the cap, raised it to my nose, and smelled almonds. I haven't had a drink since my bypass. I miss the ritual more than the burn, but I know whiskey. Mine used to sit neat in a short glass after a day pouring concrete or negotiating permits, back when a good pour was punctuation at the end of a hard sentence. Whiskey doesn't smell like almonds. Cyanide does. So does the flavoring in certain antifreezes. You live long enough, you collect facts nobody wants. I set the cap down and looked at the seam of the foil. New bottles arrived dressed sharp. That foil had a wrinkle like a shirt someone tried to iron with their hands. The security ring didn't fully separate when I twisted. The seal had been opened, then pressed back. The house clock ticked once, then again. I felt the deep old anger rise, then pass like a storm I could outwait. I wiped the mouth of the bottle with a clean dish towel. Then I reached for a roll of painter's tape, the blue kind, and circled the lid twice. Keep the evidence clean. My family gave me poisoned whiskey. I kept the bottle and stuck it in, not where they'd find it first, but where I could watch it without it watching me. The locked cabinet above the pantry, with Margaret's recipe box and our wedding album. The things that mattered went there. I tucked the bottle behind the recipe card that said, in her careful handwriting, brown sugar first, patience second. You spend decades building, and your hands remember. I built a life, then I buried it, then I learned how to keep breathing. After Margaret died, I made lists for everything. Lists kept me from losing the angles of the day. Wednesday's list read, call lab, confirm intake. Pick up insulin strips. Ask Pete about cameras. Return Laura's call. Maybe. I started with the lab, a private outfit across town, the kind that processes samples for lawyers who don't like surprises. The technician on the phone didn't care about story, only chain of custody. Bring the bottle in a sealed bag. We'll take a sample. We'll document. We'll call you in 3 days. 3 days felt like forever if you're 20. I'm 71. I know how to wait. Pete was next. He's my neighbor, 40 years on the force, retired with a limp and a habit of walking my fence line with his dog. You want the cameras inside or out? He asked over the fence. Inside. Quiet. No cloud. I'll keep the footage here. You expecting burglars? I'm expecting family. He didn't ask more. He came over with a tool bag and a roll of wire, and by dinner we had 2 tiny eyes watching over my kitchen, one above the pantry, the other tucked into the crown molding, looking down at the counter with the good light. I also put one in the dining room, trained on the long table Margaret used to fuss over, as if a proper tablecloth could fix what was broken. When he finished, Pete stood behind my chair and stared at the blank television. You sure you want to do it this way? He asked. I'm sure I want to do it once. He nodded. You call me if you need me. Doesn't have to be after the damage. The lab called late Friday. We found brodifacoum, the woman said. Calm voice, clinical words. What is it? Superwarfarin, a long-acting anticoagulant. It's used as rodenticide, colorless, odorless in solution. Symptoms take time, internal bleeding, easy bruising. It's not something you detect by taste in a dark spirit. Can a man my age survive it? Depends on dose. Often people get sick, don't connect it to the source, and it's too late. And legally? I asked. The old engineer in me liked clean lines. Will your report hold up? We've documented chain of custody from intake. We have the bottle photographed, sealed, weighed. We'll keep aliquots. If you need a witness, we can testify. I thanked her and set the phone down. I'd been holding my breath. I let it go. The next list wrote itself. Make copies of report. Safety deposit box. Call attorney. New will trust. Buy a decanter that looks like mine. Find my mother's ring. The ring wasn't for me. It was for Emma, my granddaughter, the only one who looked at me like I still belonged in my own house. She'd once stood on a chair beside me and learned how to whisk eggs without splattering them up the cabinets. Children remember effort. Adults remember outcomes. I called my attorney. I want the will rewritten today, I said. No probate theatrics. An irrevocable trust for Emma and Tommy. Conditions, college or trade school, a job that involves showing up on time. No access to Laura or Blake. We can do that, he said. He didn't ask why. He's seen worse than poisoned whiskey. I took the lab report to the bank and slid a copy into a safety deposit box. Another went into my fireproof safe at home. A third I sealed in an envelope that read, in black marker, "Open if something happens to me." On Sunday, the house rang with a familiar chime. Laura's voice reached me through the answering machine, even though I'd already picked up. She liked to leave messages before conversations, a daughter's way of controlling her own father's story. "Dad, we haven't seen you in a week," she said. "Are you okay? You didn't answer my text about Christmas planning. Blake's parents will be in town. We want to do it at your place. It means a lot to me. Call me, okay?" "Christmas here?" I asked when she finally spoke to me instead of the machine. She softened her voice the way people do when they want to sell you something. "It would be nice, Dad. We could do the roast the way Mom liked. Emma wants to help. It's important." "It is," I said. "It always was." "We'll bring the whiskey," she said. And then I knew this wasn't about roast. "You already did," I said, and let the silence sit between us long enough to make her check whether the call had dropped. "Yes," I added before she could recover. "We'll do Christmas here." I watched the kitchen light burn a narrow thread across the countertop and felt a sensation I hadn't in a long time. A calm that wasn't resignation. The next week unrolled like wire. I dusted the cap of the whiskey with the lightest trace of fluorescent powder that clings to fingerprints. Not enough to show unless you know where to look. I put a second camera in the hallway, angled toward the pantry, and a motion sensor under the dining room rug that would log steps. I bought a decanter that matched mine down to the stopper. In one, I poured tea stained with a touch of molasses until it matched the exact tone of the single malt. The other remained empty. On Tuesday, Emma dropped by after school under the pretense of borrowing a mixing bowl. She looked older whenever I wasn't looking. 13 going on 30, all elbows and insight. "Are you mad at Mom?" she asked, hovering near the doorway like girls do when they aren't sure if the room wants them. "Why would I be?" "She said you've been distant." "Distant is a long way," I said. "I've been here." She watched me for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Mom asked me to find your safe key last week. She said she needed to keep the house papers safe." "Did you?" "I said I didn't know where it was." She shifted, eyes watery, angry at tears she didn't want. I hate lying, but I didn't like how she asked, like it was an emergency and I was the fireman. "You did fine," I said, feeling something loosen in my chest. "You did just fine." She stepped closer. "Grandpa?" "Yes?" "Don't drink anything Mom brings you at Christmas." "If you want something, I'll get it." "Okay." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "Okay." When she left, I sat back down and worked on the speech I hoped I wouldn't need to give. the kind you practice to keep your hands from shaking. Midweek, I got a second report from the lab. The dose they found would have made me very sick, maybe worse, given my age and blood thinners. The report sat beside my coffee cup while snow fell slow and fat outside. December light makes everything look honest, even when it isn't. On Thursday, Pete came over to watch the footage I'd collected so far, not because anyone had come, but to make sure the angles covered everything. "You sure you want to do it inside?" he asked again. "No uniforms. No outsiders." They thought they knew what a family-only Christmas was good for. So did I. "Family only," I said, "but I want you next door." "You planning a toast?" "Something like that." Christmas Eve used to be Margaret's masterpiece. I could still hear her voice fussing over the roast and scolding me for sneaking bites. "Let them smell it, Will," she'd say, "not eat it with their eyes before they sit." I laid the tablecloth anyway. I warmed plates in the oven because Margaret believed a warm plate told a guest they were expected. They arrived like weather. Laura first, cheeks bright despite the cold. Blake behind her in a coat he couldn't afford, carrying a box wrapped in glossy paper. The grandkids tumbled in with the energy grief doesn't recognize, shaking snow onto my hallway runner. Behind them came Ellen, my son Michael's wife, arms full of gifts, eyes scanning the room like she was counting assets. Blake slapped the box onto my counter, peeled the paper with theatrical slowness, and produced a crystal decanter I recognized from my own shopping trip. "For your collection," he announced, as if I'd been collecting anything other than reasons to doubt him. "Beautiful," I said. "Put it by the others." He did, eyes sliding to the cabinet above the pantry and the key that wasn't on its hook. He covered it with a grin. "Where's your good stuff?" "I brought something special to top it off later," I said. "Dinner first." We ate the roast the way Margaret had taught me, with mustard and patience. The conversation stayed on safe islands, school, weather, the way the town plows the side streets last. Emma sat at my elbow and quietly made my plate look normal whenever my hands trembled too much to make it so. Laura drank water and avoided my eyes. Blake laughed a little too loudly at stories that weren't funny. Halfway through dessert, Laura cleared her throat. "Dad, we'd like to do a toast. To Mom. To you." "Let's do it in the dining room," I said, "by the tree." We carried our cups and plates into the next room, where the tree threw patient light onto faces I'd known since they were red and furious and brand new. I took the decanter I had filled with molasses tea and set it at the head of the table beside 6 clean glasses. I set the other empty decanter beside it, almost identical. Blake stepped forward, hand on the tea-filled decanter. "You want me to do the honors, Will?" "Not yet," I said. "There's one more thing." I left the room for a moment and returned with the whiskey bottle they'd gifted me 2 weeks earlier. The one with the tightened foil and blue tape cradled in a gallon-sized evidence bag. The cameras watched from the molding. The house listened. Laura's smile faltered. "What's that?" "A gift," I said. "From you." Blake laughed, a thin sound. "We gave you a different brand, didn't we?" "You gave me this," I said. "I enjoyed it so much I took it to a lab." Laura blinked slowly, once, twice. "A lab?" I set the lab report beside the decanters like a place card. "Brautifacum," I said. "It makes people bleed from the inside. Hard to trace." "Takes a while," Ellen set her glass down carefully, a woman who had seen enough court TV to know the difference between family drama and a felony. Michael went very still. The kids looked from face to face like spectators at a match where the rules had changed mid-serve. "That's ridiculous," Blake said, too fast. "Why would we— you think we—" He spread his hands in a gesture polished by a lifetime of getting out of parking tickets he deserved. "In my house," I said. "I prefer shorter answers." Laura's eyes shone. "Dad, you've been off your medication." "I keep my pills where I keep the things I don't want anyone to touch," I said, "which is why I noticed mine had been moved." I reached into the sideboard and pulled out a second envelope. That's the pharmacy log for last month. Someone tried to refill my warfarin early using my info. The pharmacist called me because he knows me. Said a young woman sounded just like my daughter. I told him to hold the script. He did. Color drained from Laura's face the way it does when you stand too fast. I don't know what you're... Dad, Michael started, finding his voice. This is insane. I held up my palm. We can argue about my sanity later. Right now, we're going to do something simple. I picked up the empty look-alike decanter and set it in front of Blake. You like to host. You like to pour. So you'll pour. You'll open your original gift. You'll pour around for the adults. I let the idea sit just long enough. And I'll drink first. The room thinned to a wire. Laura shook her head. Ellen looked at Michael with a question that sounded like a life. Emma reached for my hand under the table and squeezed hard enough to hurt. Blake stepped back from the bag bottle like it had sprouted fangs. You're trying to set us up. I'm giving you a chance to prove me wrong. Laura swallowed. Dad, that's not fair. You wanted family only, I said. This is family only. He had a choice then, the kind that reveals. He could have called my bluff and poured from the fake decanter, or he could have opened the bag and offered me my own murder in a glass. He did neither. He reached for the tea-filled decanter and began to pour like a man who believed he could outtalk gravity. Stop, I said, and my voice had my old foreman in it, the one that brooked no second tries. He froze. You just had to make it like this, Blake muttered, eyes bright. You just had to be dramatic. The camera above your head is dramatic, I said. This is just conversation. He looked up reflexively and saw nothing because I'd hidden it well, but the idea of it was enough. Sweat gathered at his hairline. Laura's hands shook. I had never wanted to see my daughter like that. I wanted her in pigtails asking for one more story. But you have to look at the thing you're fixing before you can fix it. You're sick, she whispered. You're making stories because you're alone and old. Old people are allowed to notice when their whiskey smells like almonds, I said. And when the man who gives it to them buys rodenticide with cash at the feed store out on Route 12. Blake's head jerked toward me. You've been following me? I hired someone younger to do it. I tapped my pocket. He sent me photos. I'll return the favor. I haven't followed you tonight, but my neighbor is at his kitchen table with his shoes on. He knows to walk over if he hears me raise my voice. We stood like that for a moment, separate as furniture. Then I picked up one of the clean glasses and set it in front of me. One more time, I said quietly. Prove me wrong. Don't, Laura hissed to Blake, too sharp for a whisper. The word cracked like ice. That did it. Something ugly flared behind his eyes, the kind of pride that ruined good men and made bad ones feel inevitable. He grabbed the evidence bag. Fine, he said, tearing at the plastic. Fine. We'll toast your paranoia. Mom, Emma started. It's okay, I said to her without looking away from him. My heart beat steady in my ears, a hammer striking a nail that would not go in crooked. He wrestled with the blue painter's tape that sealed the cap. Then he stopped. He couldn't get it open without touching what I'd dusted. He looked at his hands, then at the bottle, then at me, and in that hesitation, my plan found its shape. Criminals are regular people who think the world will blink first. Blake blinked. That one's too hard, he said, dropping it back onto the table with casual disdain he didn't feel. He reached for the decanter of tea again like a drowning man reaching for the wrong rope. You've answered my question, I said. You set us up, Laura said, voice shredded. You built a stage and waited for us to trip. I built a place to tell the truth, I said. You brought the lie. Emma was crying now, soundless, mascara making small shadows down her face she'd laugh at later. Michael looked at his wife like she could hand him a shovel big enough to dig out. You knew Mom would never let this happen, Laura said, and the name hit me with precision. You waited until she was gone to turn on us. You waited until Christmas to humiliate your own children. There it was. Not apology, not fear. Accusation. The child who had learned early that offense could be a shield. I waited, I said, until I had something you couldn't explain away. Not to humiliate, to stop it. You think the worst thing I can do tonight is embarrass you? You sent your father poison and a smile. Blake laughed then, high and desperate. You think any of this will stick? It's your word against ours. He's old. He's confused. He tried to trick us. He tampered with his own bottle. He pointed at the cameras he couldn't see. He staged it. I turned the lab report so it faced them again. Chain of custody, I said. Your fingerprints are under that tape. The only reason they're not on my counter is because I wiped the bottle after I opened it the first time. The bag has yours from a minute ago, though. I looked at Emma. Could you go to the kitchen and bring me the blue light on the sink? She brought it like a relay baton. I clicked it on, and the mouth of the bottle glowed with the faint constellation of powder I'd laid there. Blake saw it and took one involuntary step back. The good thing about lying, I said, is you don't have to keep it up once you stop. The good thing about telling the truth is you don't have to remember it. Laura stood straighter then, as if the rest of the scene could be salvaged by posture alone. What do you want? She asked flatly. You want us to apologize? Is that it? Cry? Beg? Merry Christmas, Dad. I want to eat dessert and go to bed, I said. I want to wake up tomorrow and not worry that my coffee is going to kill me. I want you to look your children in the face and tell them what you did. I want it quiet tonight, in this room with our tree and our roast and your good blouse. No police, no neighbors, just us. She blinked. Pride warred with some small animal of survival behind her eyes. If you tell the truth here, I continued, I'll keep it here. If you lie, I call Pete, and he calls the people who drive cars with lights. You will not like that version. Your jobs will not like that version. Your friends who take photos of their food will not like that version. I am old, yes, but I am not dead, and I have time for this. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, about to persuade the sun to come up early. Then he stopped. He looked at Emma, at Tommy shivering beside her in a sweater he hated, at the tree blinking its patient code, and whatever was left of his good sense found him. You bought it, he said to Blake without looking at him. You told her it was a joke. You told me Dad wouldn't drink anyway. He swallowed hard, words thick. You said... Blake's mouth opened and closed. They're ungrateful, he said, switching to a new script. Your father has money he doesn't use. He keeps it. He let your mother... Michael moved then, fast for a man who hadn't run since his teens. His fist landed on Blake's shoulder instead of his face because the better angels learned to tug at the last second. The glassware on the table chimed like a choir cut short. Enough, I said, louder than I meant to, and that was the sound Pete had been waiting for next door. Somewhere a dog barked, then stopped. I put your names in my will this morning, I said, and then I wrote them out. I put your children's names in instead. I added a letter that says why. If anyone asks what happened to Christmas, I want you to be able to tell them, one by one, at school and at work and at church if you still go, that you tried to poison an old man because you thought you deserved what he built. And he didn't let you. That is your inheritance. That story Laura made a small sound, more animal than word. Blake looked at the door like a man measuring distances. Ellen covered her mouth and cried for the first real time since she'd married into our last name. Emma slipped her hand into mine under the table again, a secret we didn't need to hide. Dad, Michael said, voice low and raw. I didn't. I know what you didn't do, I said. I also know what you didn't stop. We sat inside that, a family of 4 generations and one decision. Then Laura did something I couldn't have predicted at the beginning of the night. She turned toward her children. Her voice came out small and clear. Your grandpa is telling the truth, she said. I brought that bottle. I thought... She swallowed. I didn't think it through. I told myself it would make things easier, that he was already— Her mouth worked around words it wouldn't open for. "I'm sorry," she said finally, and to my surprise, I believed the shape of it in her mouth even if it didn't yet have the weight. Blake stared at her like she'd defected in a war he'd invented. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "He's manipulating you." "Maybe," she said, voice shaking, "but he's still my father. And those are my kids." Silence rearranged itself. My shoulders eased for the first time in weeks. "Here's what happens next," I said. "You'll go home. You'll sleep. Tomorrow you'll come back without Blake. We'll drink coffee. We'll call a counselor who knows how to do more than listen. You'll tell that person why you bought poison. You'll tell your children again in a better order. You'll bring me every spare key to this house. And you'll stop asking about my safe." "And me?" Blake demanded. "You'll not come here," I said. "Ever again." He laughed, but it sounded like brakes. He looked at Laura for backup and found none. He looked at Michael and found open contempt. "Get out," Laura said to him softly. The softest words make the loudest changes. He went. He took his coat and his expensive cologne and the last of my patience out into the cold night, and the door closed with a sound that felt like a wall settling onto a good foundation. In the quiet that followed, Emma let out a breath she'd been holding for a month. Tommy leaned into his mother and cried in a way that told the truth had landed where it needed to. Michael stared at the floor and started to say something and then didn't, which was the first wise thing he'd done in a long time. "You kept the bottle and stuck it in the cabinet," Emma said finally, finishing the sentence I hadn't. "I did," I said. "Why?" "So I'd remember what we were actually toasting to." We didn't drink anything stronger than water that night. We sliced Margaret's pie and chewed slowly and let the grief and the anger and the relief stand on their own plates. When they left, I walked the perimeter of the house, as I do, checking windows twice even though I know it isn't the glass that breaks a home. Pete met me on the porch. "You need me to make a call?" "No," I said. "Not yet." They told the truth. He looked at me in the way men my age do, which is to say he said very little and saw a lot. "You did what you came to do." "I did what I had to." "Same thing," he said, then put his hand on my shoulder and went back into his own warm house. I cleaned the dining room the way Margaret taught me, first the plates, then the glasses, then the tablecloth folded on the cool side so it doesn't crease wrong. The cameras blinked their quiet lights down on the room and recorded only the sound of a house that had decided to keep standing. I took the evidence bag and the report back to the safe, put them inside, and turned the dial. I took the new will out of my coat pocket and set it beside our wedding album on the top shelf. When I finally went to bed, I lay there and listened to the radiator hum and thought about all the men I'd known who wanted revenge to look like fire. Fire shows sure. It burns, it cleans. But sometimes the most righteous heat is the light you turn on in a room and force people to sit in, make them see what they tried to do, make them live with that light. Morning came the same way it always does, which is to say, if you're lucky. I made coffee. I set out 3 mugs. When the knock came, it was small and careful. Laura stood on the porch with her children. Her eyes were red. She held out a ring box, my mother's ring inside. "I took this once," she said. "Years ago. I put it back when I felt ashamed. But the stealing stayed with me anyway. I want you to give it to Emma. I want you to do it in front of me." We sat at the table and did it right. I told Emma what my mother had told me about the ring, that it wasn't a thing you wear to feel worthy, but a thing you wear when you're already acting like it. I told Tommy he would not get a ring, but he would get my hammer, and that seemed to please him more than jewelry ever could. Laura told them both what she had done and what she would do to fix it. She didn't say the word poison. She didn't have to. We had all breathed it in. We had all chosen something else. In the afternoon, I took the whiskey bottle out of the cabinet and set it on the counter one last time. I don't throw tools away if they still teach me. I labeled it Lesson. I put it in the back of the safe. You spend your life building, and sometimes the last thing you build is the boundary that should have been there all along. Mine has my name on the deed and my chair by the window and a cabinet where the things that matter go. My family gave me poisoned whiskey. I kept the bottle and stuck it in the place where I keep the things I won't forget. Then I turned on the lights, and I waited for them to tell the truth. That was the toast, and we drank it.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.